Today, we're investigating the technology that is shaping the future of investing with Pierre Mendelsohn, the founder and CEO of Alpima, the SaaS platform for investment management and product design. Pierre, welcome to the Fintech Files.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great to have you here. So can we start by asking what's your background and what made you start Alpima?
The first thing I'd say is I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And that comes in part, I think, from being from a family of doctors. I've seen people run their businesses, and I've always been inspired by that. But I decided to take a different course. I trained as an aerospace engineer, an applied mathematician, and I ended up at Wall Street, working for the large firms in the US and Europe and Asia, focused on quant strategies and derivatives. And I was fortunate to work in a number of roles. But while working for the industry, the one thing that I noted, which really struck me, is that technology was not evolving very much in helping clients. And if you looked at how the industry changed from 1995 to 2014, it's fair to say the tech we were using to build solutions and serve clients did not really change very much year on year. So that started to tickle me a bit in the mid-2000s. Then the crisis happened, the global financial crisis happened. I stayed in the industry until 2014, but by 2014, I was ready to start. I knew what I thought I needed to do, the kind of platform I wanted to use as a client or a professional. And I also felt that I knew who to call. And I also felt it was the right time in my life. I had what I thought was sufficient savings and figured it's now or never. It was a classic case of if not now, when, and if not me, who kind of thing. So that's really what made me start Alpima.
Wonderful. So can you tell us a bit more about Alpima? What does the company do, and what type of client does it serve?
Sure. So we're a SaaS platform, B2B SaaS platform for investment managers and product design. Our clients are asset managers, product providers, wealth managers, asset owners, and consultants. We help them model, build, and implement investment strategies for them and their clients. And so a key part of this is visualization, backtesting, and forward testing. And that also enables something which is difficult to achieve in practice, which is to bring personalization at scale. So we enable our clients to offer their customers highly personalized solutions under their brand. And because we're cloud-based, we can deliver our service very easily as a white label service. And one thing about us that is really special is you can use Alpima on day one. It's an extremely easy process to log in. And simply put, we help our clients remain at the forefront of innovation and client service in a very competitive, fast changing market as well.
This is not an IT project that involves many people at the client firm and will probably take a long time. It's something that...
Well, the integration of the platform may result into an IT project, but the unique feature about a platform like ours, because of its architecture being cloud-based, is you can give day one experience by simply having people link into a browser and click a few buttons. And so that's really special. And from then on, you can basically get requirements from people using the platform who come back and say, look, can I integrate into this and that data source? Can I perhaps add these features? Can I remove these features? And then we work on two things, implementing and integrating the platform at the client, and then responding to particular requirements, and we can configure the platform for that. And that may take a project to your point. So sometimes there is an enterprise project that goes with the work. Sometimes there isn't. It depends on the scale and the purpose of the mission.
Sure. I understand. So you can obviously do more, but as you've given me a login in preparation for this podcast, I had the experience myself, and I have to say it is very visual. I'd almost say it's fun to play around with. You talk about object-oriented investing. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So that sounds like a very old phrase from the 80s and 90s. Object orientation is something that is very well known in technology and business. So we're taking that core concept and applying it to finance. It's a very powerful idea. And really what that means in practice is we're saying that every investment strategy, whatever that is, your portfolio, an index, a systematic strategy, whatever you think of really, can be described and modeled as a digital object. That means a model with code and a unique identifier to access it. And once you're able to do that, you're able to do plenty of things which otherwise take much longer to do, like visualizing, modeling, backtesting, tuning, optimizing, and you can also use that to deploy the product when ready. So it's a very powerful idea, and the power of it resides in the fact that it's complete. The fact that there is no investment strategy that cannot be described as an object. So it's a very powerful concept. And in terms of business benefits, it literally goes across the range from efficiency, speed, all the way to hopefully creating better solutions that perform because you've optimized them, because you've actually managed to tune them to exactly what you want to achieve. So it's a fantastic means to an end, which allows for great visualization and better implementation. I mean, just to give you a bit of context, with Alpima, as you may have seen, it takes about 10 to 20 seconds to build a high-quality dynamic strategy, which, if you don't have Alpima, would take days, possibly weeks, even long, sometimes months. So we're talking here about several orders of magnitude of improvement in speed. And then it's also the key to allowing clients to then customize solutions. So you can put a stable of offerings on a platform and then let your clients, your customers, take the object, customize it, tune it, and then deploy a version of it that fits their own varied requirements.
And that's compared to what would the investment managers, your clients, be using at the moment instead? And I would guess that Excel spreadsheets have a big part of it.
So that's a very good point. The industry is still using essentially a toolkit that is powerful but a bit dated. So usually you've got spreadsheets. You need some market feed coming in with data from vendors like Bloomberg, Refinitiv, and others. You perhaps have some programming languages involved. That can be VBA, C#, Python, MATLAB. And then you need to visualize. And that usually is done on PowerPoint presentations, on term sheets, in Word or PDF, or it can sometimes be done on websites. But you don't really have a single platform that allows you to do all of this in a way that's integrated. And so the thing about Alpima is that you can actually feed into these systems. You can integrate with the existing toolkit, but yet give that one experience across a number of functions in the organization. You can connect research to structuring, to portfolio management, to the CIO office, to sales, all the way to clients. And so there is something else about the benefit of the platform, which is that it basically joins users up on a single platform. And that in itself is very powerful, because now you're making interaction a lot quicker. You all of a sudden have people exchange a lot more efficiently, a lot quicker, and that's really good for the overall value proposition.
And if we go back to this concept of object-oriented, and you also mentioned about digitizing portfolio. So can we go a bit more into that and talk about, so what can you do with a digital, or we say digitizing or digitalizing, what can you do with a digital portfolio? And there's something that comes to my mind is like, if I have a 3D model of the house, I can move it to any dimensions I want, and possibly test whatever I want instantly, right? Rather than, is that a good
it's an extremely good analogy, and it touches on something important, which is that in order to understand something, first you have to model it. Other industries like aerospace, automobile, architecture, to your point, consumer goods have been doing this for years. They digitize their products before they bring it to market. And if you look at an aircraft, for example, before it gets manufactured, there's a very advanced digital model that gets created and tested before it gets then sent to manufacturing. So digitizing the portfolio or digitalizing the portfolio is doing the same thing. First, you create a digital model of the investment strategy or the portfolio you want to implement. That means you create a model that actually has some logic to it, and a link that allows you to immediately retrieve it. And the logic is very much like the DNA of the object that you're looking at. It's the logic about what does it contain, how often does it rebalance, what currency is it in, and what's the logic that drives the object. So once you have that model, then you can basically do a number of things. First, you can look at it across past, present, and future in a way that is very powerful and instantly. So past is all about backtesting. How did the strategy perform? Where did performance come from? How did it compare to benchmarks? What were the historical drawdowns? what's the volatility, etc., etc. The present is what's in the portfolio today. How does it relate to the world? What would happen if rates went up? What would happen if oil went down? What would happen if Tesla had another big move? And then you can also look at the future, because now, of course, you can project it going forward using what's called Monte Carlo simulations. And that gives you a sense of how the object might perform in the future based on certain assumptions. So that gives you chances of gains and losses, and whether you can achieve certain goals. So that makes goal-based investing a very direct consequence of object-oriented investing. So it's an extremely powerful concept to digitize before you deploy. And then you can use that digital result and make that the production object, right? You can say, okay, now I want to activate what I've optimized for me, and now that becomes something which goes from the backtesting or historical stage into a production implemented, invested stage. And then one more thing I should say is that because you're dealing with digital models, a digital description of your project, if you ever decided to settle electronically, which is very fashionable these days with digital ledgers and crypto, you can of course do that because the object you've created is referred to with an identifier. So most of our clients are still very much using settlement in the real world, but object-oriented investing, digitizing your portfolio allows you, should you ever wanted to do so, to basically use electronic settlement and so forth. Right? So you've got a tokenized object, to use the phrase that's relevant here. You've got a tokenized object by default. Every token links to a particular object. So it's very, very powerful.
And if we go to so let's go to the client side now. So who would be the typical user? Is it a portfolio manager at a fund management firm? Would that be a good example?
It's a good example. We've got a variety of use cases that Alpima is used for, and it typically ranges across one, product design and portfolio design. So now you're basically supplying either a product team or the CIO team, and you're helping them create portfolios and implement them. You also have sales teams or solutions teams that can use the platform in order to create solutions in real time or near real time with their clients to see what would happen if. And that's a very powerful way to engage with your clients, because you can test a few hypotheses. You can see what would happen if you put a hedge on the portfolio, or what would happen if you removed certain constituents. And then there is also, very importantly, helping an end-to-end solution, whereby certain firms want to ensure that what they allow their clients to invest in is in tune with a strategic asset allocation. And in that case, the platform gets used by a number of users, product, relationship management with a CIO group, making sure that the strategic asset allocation at the top is in accordance with their decision. So it's really a very broad set of possible use cases. And the last thing I should say is also, this has been more recent as a development, we're also helping more and more research teams or quant teams essentially design and experiment using Alpima before they deploy. And for that, they use an interface called Notebooks, which is really the quant interface into the platform. So there's two ways you can interact with the platform. Simply put, one is you've got a graphical interface where you click buttons and create an object as you do that. But by definition, that's a very finite set of possibilities. You can never cover all possible use cases that clients will want to create. So the alternative is to also give access to what's called notebooks. And that's essentially a programmable interface, very similar to Jupyter Notebooks, where users can decide to code whatever they want to do and see if it works until such time as they get a result that is hopefully satisfactory for them.
Now that really talks to me as someone who was on the sales side. I can understand, but let's dig a bit further into this. So, someone who in sales who doesn't have necessarily a technical background, but obviously understands about investment, is now able to look, for example, very quickly at Monte Carlo simulation.
That's right.
Which normally, well, again, is something accessible to many sales, etc., but perhaps not at the tip of your finger.
That's right. And I guess you're trying to make it easy to answer simple questions like, what's the chance this is going to perform in the future? What's the chance this is going to help me beat my 2.5% inflation target? What's the chance that this is actually going to exceed my liability schedule so that I can indeed ensure that my investments are doing what they must? So all of a sudden, all these questions that are not easy to answer are readily answerable because you've got the platform at your disposal, doing the hard math for you. And it's really splitting the answer into these three parts: past, present, future. And that came from practice, by the way. Speaking to clients, often what they want to know is, how did this thing perform in the past? So let's see how it looked like during, say, periods of stress. How did it compare to other strategies and so forth? Second, how does it relate to the world today? How does it link to markets today? What would happen if? And then lastly, what's the distribution of outcomes that I can expect in the future? And is that in line with what I want to achieve? And usually an investment is made when all these three topics have been covered in some depth.
Yeah, I can see how it helps a lot in the, let's say, ideation process from the very beginning of maybe a conversation on the phone, where you can pretty much have all the results straight away and filter out, some things very quickly before moving on to a more in-depth implementation application.
And it also plays a role in the post-implementation stage, where now you've got something running and you want to make sure it's still in tune with your objectives and aspirations. So you can basically monitor whatever you've implemented with great precision, and you get all these insights on the drivers of performance, on the risks, on how this thing's doing, on whether you're still within your risk ratios if you've got those. So it's an extremely helpful thing to use as well after you've implemented, because you've got at your disposal all the metrics on real numbers based on market moves.
So I can clearly see how it's improving the client, let's call it client service, also the process from client to structuring or CIO. Another challenge, I guess, that the industry is facing is the race to lower fees, right? How would you say this kind of tool can improve the process and the efficiency from a cost basis?
Well, it's incredibly efficient when you have a platform that is set up and integrated with your data sources to see what people can do with it, because the platform is there. You don't need to rebuild it. And so you've got an inbuilt operational leverage into the way the platform operates. So that's the first thing. And of course, over time, people can add more functionality, more data links, more features as time goes on, but that's incremental. The core is there, it doesn't change, and it doesn't cost much to maintain from a client perspective. The second thing that is really interesting is the notion that you're now connecting various roles and you're giving management information that they never had before on the usage of the platform. So as soon as you get enough users on the platform to make the observations statistically relevant, you can actually see who's using what and to what extent. And so that can inform senior management as to things that are of interest, things that perhaps aren't that much of interest. You can perhaps see trends across usage, and all of a sudden you're basically equipping senior management with data they've never seen before. So the platform creates its own metadata on usage that can really help firms make better decisions as to things that are in demand, things that clients are actually using versus not. And that gives you new insights, completely new insights, versus the previous status quo, which was simply have people talk to you about what's going on. Now you've got the ability to get a dashboard that gives you clear information about usage, data feeds, what is going on the platform, and so forth. So that's an added advantage. And we've discovered over the years that this is actually something of value. Clients really like that. It's called we used to call it the admin app, and now it's called Meta. It's a module of the platform, and it's something that is more and more used by our enterprise clients.
Yeah, something that is not something that we've discussed with someone else in terms of all the data that you can have in the firm internally eventually is extremely precious, and people are just starting to to grapple with this. And then when we have a lot of data, there's also a lot of insights that, well, you didn't know you wanted or you didn't know you needed, but suddenly there's a lot to work with, right?
And you could see, for example, if you put a stable of portfolios or strategies on the menu, now you've got the ability to see what is being clicked by whom. You perhaps believe that your big ESG launch is going to gather huge interest, and all of a sudden the data perhaps tells you something a little bit different. You've got to do something to it to really make it a success. So you're basically giving the information to management and to the operators so that they can make whatever changes needed to become more client-centric and hopefully more successful.
And another thing which is very obvious when you try, and as I have been able to log in, is the intuitive and visual for something that is very technical, quantitative. Is it something that was a trade-off? Did you have to look at the visual versus the technical feature? How did you approach that? Or did you prioritize, well, obviously you want the technical features to be in, but coming from a technical background, how did you approach the visual aspect?
Well, I think those two things are very complementary. So the interface and the math are extremely complementary, and firms like Google and Apple have taught us that great interface doesn't have to compromise the power of the product and the analytics. So we strive to maintain the user experience to be as simple and intuitive as possible while developing the most powerful capabilities in the back. And you know this well, it's very well documented that visualization is a very important part of understanding, and has been for thousands of years. Seeing is believing, seeing is understanding. So if we can make that aspect more closely connected to powerful math, we think that's helpful, and we'll continue to focus on that going forward. We're now having a big push on helping optimize the UX based on client feedback as well. So it's not just intuition, but when things looks good, it's really based on the feedback you're getting from clients, and we're using that in order to make the experience hopefully better and better over time.
Great. So before I go to your outlook, I also want to ask, what do you see for you? What is what are the main marketing or growth challenging? Because it's a wonderful product, but I can imagine that you're dealing with a complex and long sales cycle. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that comes with the territory when you do B2B sales. It's measured in months and quarters, sometimes years. So you've got to somehow put a process in place that allows you to operate as you're working through the sales process with enterprise. And candidly, we've learned a lot about this in the last few years. So there's something to be said about having a process, monitoring the data, make sure that you follow up thoroughly and so on and so forth. The second thing that is also candidly been a challenge is that when we started, we were creating a category, and people were like, wait, what is this? Is this a risk model? Is this just a reporting system? And the truth is you do a bit of both. So we had to do a bit of explaining. And in truth, most of our clients and prospects are keenly aware they need to digitalize their businesses. Very few are aware, however, of exactly how to do it. So we find that the challenge is in basically helping people understand what to do in order to digitalize, and the platform becomes a means of demonstrating that. So for us, it's been a very interesting experience. For some of our clients, it's also sometimes been an eye-opening experience to see what the platform can do. Candidly, people sometimes may not appreciate what technology today can allow one to do. And it takes seeing the demo and seeing the platform to go, I see. I didn't know I was able to do this. Then there's a third challenge, which is something typical when you're selling to enterprise. You arrive and you do your demo, and you're proud of showing your product, but inevitably, product teams at some of our prospecting clients will say, "Look, I can do this. That doesn't seem that hard." So there is what we call the illusion of internal competition. Some firms we speak to believe they can build what we've built, and the truth is we've seen the movie before. Clients try, they spend a few millions, they arrive at some result, it isn't quite what they wanted, and then they somehow call us back. And why do they call us back? Because the truth is we make it look easy. Right? So people think that what we do can be easy to replicate it, when in truth there's years of hard work in dev, production work, and so forth that led us to the results. So we're now finding that there's an important component in our pitch, which is to say, look, you will probably think you can do this on your own. The truth is, the optimal approach is to partner with us, because we've done all this work, we've done all the hard work, and by partnering with us, we can save years and millions of expense. So we're trying to address the point a bit earlier, going, we know what you're thinking. We've seen it before, and we understand. And by the way, I used to do this at big banks before, and I know the challenges of building platforms in large organizations. I mean, you know them well, George, we're in the industry. It's very hard to do this when you're in a large corporate, right? It's for a number of reasons. It takes a number of years to build. It's not easy to fit a schedule that is 3 to 5 years into a corporate schedule. And then you've got, of course, elements of corporate inertia and so forth that perhaps make it difficult to build this into a large group. Not to mention sometimes political forces that may or may not be aligned with what you're trying to build. So the truth is, large groups, large firms, want to do something. They know they've got to digitalize, but what they find difficult is the how. And that's where we come in.
Yeah, sure. Understood. And that comes back to the point about visual versus technical. Sometimes you can figure, okay, I can build a model, but if there's not the UX, etc., and no one uses it, what's the point? And that's very hard, and it's a different set of skills. So I totally understand. So now I want to move on to your outlook, and we've discussed a bit, but can you tell us, what do you think is the most exciting part for the future of the investment management industry?
So I think the investment management industry is at an incredibly exciting juncture. And the exciting part is the future itself. Because now you're getting to a point where technology can demonstrably do things that are adding value to clients and to firms. And so what we see are clear trends, which we're very excited about, is that there will be more customer centricity. It's understood that in order to remain competitive, you have to be more client-centric. And for that, you've got to have tech. There's an understanding that in order to compete, you've got to also allow people to personalize solutions. And without having a headache when you do that, you've got to have the tech that makes it natural for firms to give personalized service without having to exert huge energy. And what that means is that it will allow iterations, and it will basically produce better and better solutions that are built in a shorter and shorter amount of time. I think there'll also be an increased focus on visualization, to your point about making complicated things simple. The most complex Monte Carlo simulations can be rendered extremely simply. In the end, it's about what's the chance I'm going to be above a certain benchmark. So, you can make the complicated simple, and technology can help that. I think transparency is another thing that we're excited about. And to your point about fees, I think the key is not necessarily to reduce fees, but to, for the same amount of fees, give a better service, give more insights into the products you're selling, demonstrate why it is special, demonstrate how it differentiates. Why is it that client X needs to work with firm A? And the visualization of the products, the ability to demonstrate visually why you're a better solution is, I think, a very important part of this. So to me, the future of investment management is actually very exciting, because we're seeing an industry going from what used to be solely a product model to a product and service model, and perhaps going to a stage where service is the dominant proposition over product. One more thing I would add to this is financial literacy. I think technology will help with visualization, personalization, engagement to actually increase the level of financial literacy, the level of understanding of what goes into a product, what makes it good, why does it fit me as a person as opposed to the next person. All these things will go up in time naturally as a result of technology becoming more widespread in the industry. So we think it's an incredibly exciting time. And the truth is, large firms, existing firms, have the capacity and the runway in terms of years to really do exciting work. We've seen it happen. We see now multi-year plans being put in place or well on the way, depending on the organizations. And it's exciting to see that people are taking it really seriously. Now, when you put things like ESG into the mix, when you put new considerations, difficult macro with zero rates and so forth, technology can really help make a case that firms are competing and doing the right things for their clients.
Exciting. So we're very excited about the future of the investment industry, thanks to you. And I think that's a great conclusion. I'm just going to finish, as it's customary here, with a couple of personal questions, quick-fire questions and light-hearted ones. So what would you do if you were to choose a different career path?
Well, you know what, George? I would do what I do now because it combines a number of things that I love. Applied mathematics, finance, markets, technology, clients, and adventure. It's a really special privilege to be able to be in my position. And this is part of the reason why I'm so optimistic about Alpima. I would do what I do. I absolutely love what I do.
And you even mentioned during the conversation, I remember we talked about digital airplanes as digital objects. So I think you mentioned your studies. There's also a link there, perhaps.
There's a huge link. I studied aerospace. Before I worked in finance, I interned with a company in the aerospace sector in Toulouse, in France, and that stayed with me. And candidly, I'm a bit of a geek. I'm a huge aviation fan, and I'm a private pilot as well. Flying has always been a huge source of inspiration for me, and I see huge many parallels between flight and what we do, human and machine. Overcoming a challenge through innovation, navigating uncertainty, controlling a complex system based on limited information, etc., etc. So there's many parallels, and to this day, I still remain super interested in the field because I think it helps us feed ideas into what we do.
And I know it's very time-consuming as well, so you really have to be passionate about it.
Yes, I mean, that's what drove me to my studies, and I did a bit of flying when I was a student, but then I stopped for a long time, for about 11 years, and I resumed in the early 2000s. And today I do my best to stay current. COVID is not really helping. But the whole subject of aviation is actually a very rich source of inspiration for innovation and the interaction of human and machine. It's an area in which, in short periods of time, massive progress was made by people thinking through how can things be done better and how can we model something before we actually go and do it. So it's very much a very live source of inspiration for me on a regular basis.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but that's a lot of food for thought. So I think we'll finish here, but thank you so much, Pierre, for this very insightful talk about the future of investing, and all the best to you and the Alpima team.
Thanks, George, for having me.
Thanks for listening, and thank you to our guests who make this possible. Subscribe to never miss an episode. As this is a new broadcast, if you could give us a 5-star review on iTunes and your favorite podcast player, that would be great. Let's work together to accelerate fintech towards the 2030s.